Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining us. My name is Ali Hirji. I work and teach at Durham College, and I'm also the lead on the Cyber Exchange Advisory Committee. You're joining me here today, live, from the St. Francis Center here in Ajax. I want to thank Mayor Collier, I want to thank the team from CyberX for making this amazing, probably first of its kind cybersecurity studio possible here in Durham region. I also want to acknowledge that we are on the lands of the peoples of the Mississaugas of the Scugog Islands First Nation. This land is governed and protected under the Williams Treaties. How often have you learned or heard the statement, you learn from failures, not from success? Or perhaps, to quote Einstein, people who have not made mistakes have not tried anything new. How true or how much can we hold on to this in the world of cybersecurity? 90% of cybersecurity threats often are centered at the human element. So, how much can we allow for the human, you and I, to make mistakes? I'll tell you this much though. I'm a big fan of making mistakes, but I question how we learn from it. Smart people learn from their own mistakes, but the really sharp ones learn from the mistakes of others. One such really sharp individual who's joining me today is my colleague on the advisory. Her name is Maytel, and I welcome her to the Cyber Exchange Power Hour. May, welcome.
Hi, Ali. How are you?
I am very well, and how are you?
Everything is perfect. A nice Friday evening here.
Fantastic. Well, for the next little while, I'm going to engage you on a couple of things, but I want to start off with this aspect of the human element in cybersecurity. It's at the core of what you do, and I know that you also invest a lot of time on the training and awareness piece as part of your CISO practices. Tell our audience a little bit about who you are, what is it that you do, and why the human factor is at the nucleus of your practice.
Oh, wow. Well, we only have 20 minutes, so I'll try and keep it short and to the point.
Sure.
I've been a security professional for almost 20 years now. And after being in all sorts of roles, including being a CISO for quite a few years now, I understood something very serious, that it doesn't really matter how much money and time and effort I invest in technology. Technology is super important, but it's not going to be the silver bullet against cyber attacks. And when I realized that as a CISO, I started investing more and more on the human side. That led me to develop my own company, my own brand, focusing on security awareness,
Yep.
building a very strong community here in Israel around security awareness, doing a TEDx talk, writing a book, and really investing about 20% of my time is now dedicated to volunteering with children, with senior citizens, with people in general to make them understand why cybersecurity is everyone's business, why everyone should be involved in it, why we should all be aware of the risks and the opportunities that this incredible industry has in mind for us.
We become a product, and I say this with air quotes, we sort of become a product of the people that we spend our time with. And you mentioned, your work in Israel. You're currently situated in Tel Aviv, the startup nation capital of the world. I mean, I think you guys have more than the number of startups you have per capita exceed far more than anywhere else in the world. And there are a number of reasons around that. But I want to put that to the side for a moment, and I want to go to the situation in Tel Aviv where it's important to realize that you spend a lot of time thinking through how to avert disasters. From a political standpoint, from a geographical standpoint, you're kind of situated in a tense environment. How much has that contributed to the cybersecurity innovation that you've engaged in and the innovation that we see coming out of Tel Aviv?
Well, I think it has a very direct connection. Let's say until about 2003, I think, I was absolutely convinced 100% that I'm going to be a doctor.
Right.
But I was already in the IDF for 2, 3, 4 years then. I don't remember how long. And then someone asked me, "Do you want to go into information security?" I said, "Wow, that sounds amazing. What is it?" So yeah, we are situated in a location that has a lot of, let's call it geopolitical. There's a very specific climate in Israel, and we have to be very innovative in everything we do, not only cybersecurity. And I think that in cybersecurity, we have the advantage and the disadvantage of being here, being part of the Israeli nation, being part of the Israeli, well, with the IDF and everything that goes on, and cyber wars, and we see that growing day to day. And I think that's part of who we are. We are an innovative culture, we are an innovative country.
Yep. I think the aspect of
cybersecurity.
yeah, and I think when it comes to security, it's become a matter of at least from your lens, it's not just about the locks on the door, but it's also about as is the case anywhere else. But you've innovated so much in this is that once somebody's in through the door, what happens after that? And the ability to create intelligence feeds and threat feeds, etc., so that you know how to be better prepared for tomorrow today. And I want to take one aspect of this cyber resiliency that has really germinated in Israel and focus a little bit on your practice, especially after hearing your TED talk. You pay a lot of attention to the family and the home, especially children. Why is that so frequently a part of the messaging and a part of your cybersecurity parlance?
Well, first of all, let's be very frank.
Yeah.
As a CISO, it's my job to protect the company. And when I go to the employees around the company and tell them I need your help protecting the company, they say, but that's your job. That's not my job. And if I want to really change their perspective about cybersecurity, they have to have something in it for themselves. And to be honest, the easiest way and probably the best way of getting people involved is through their families, their children. That's what interests them. And that's how I get people around my organization involved and into cybersecurity, and they know that it's important to them personally, and they use the same practices that they use at home, they use the same practices in the office. So that's my objective. And also, I'm looking at the next generation. I'll ask you a question that I usually ask when I do big talks, especially before, in front of parents. Yeah. But think about for a second, just close your eyes for a second and think about the dumbest thing you've done when you were 16.
Right.
Really, the stupidest one.
Yep.
Now think that exact thing comes back to haunt you in a job interview when you're 33.
Yep.
And that's the reality of of who are now children and teenagers. They don't have the advantages that we did of doing something really stupid when we were 16 and it just went away and only my friends know about it.
Yep.
Instagram knows about it, TikTok knows about it, Facebook knows about it. So they can't hide from their past. So I think that's a big issue today.
You know, a couple of days ago, I was talking to Kat Kood, who's also on our advisory, and she's a good friend of yours. You know her well. I know her quite well as well. And we were talking about privacy, which, as you know, is her field of practice and thought. And we quoted an existentialist philosopher, I think you'd be familiar with, judging by your style, Jean-Paul Sartre, where he says, "Hell is other people." And this inability, and he didn't mean that in a sense that everybody around you is, for lack of a better word, a fragment of hell. He meant is that gaze, you know, when people are watching. But you know, back then you could at least control who watched, but now the watching that happens, the digital surveillance that happens, the value exchange that we give through our data means that you can't really control who's watching simply because you cannot guide or you cannot read through what some of those policy statements are, which takes me to a question that has sort of come in, and I'll weave it in a bit of a different way, and that is how does in your practice, how do you help companies develop the right policies or develop the right kind of compliance frameworks to ensure that the citizens that you're servicing are well protected?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yep.
It really depends on the company.
Yep.
It depends on the company, whether it's a local company based in Israel or is it a global company, and we have to adhere to various types of security and privacy practices. In general, what I try to advise people to do is not to take more information that we really need. I used to be a CISO for a very large, sort of the equivalent of Craigslist in
Right.
Israel. And I was the CISO there for almost 3 years. And every time someone in marketing or in product had an idea, let's collect this data.
Yeah.
And they want to collect more and more data in some sort of idea of doing something in the future. And every single time it came up, I told them, look, I have no problem with us saving data as long as it is in adherence to what we are supposed to do, to why we are supposed to keep data. If we're keeping data just because we can, I think that's being a bit intrusive.
Right.
But that's my personal views. I'm very happy that with that specific company, I was there, as I said, for almost 3 years, and they were completely on board with me on that. But on other companies, it's not that easy. They want to get as much information as they can. Maybe it will be useful at some point in time.
When you're talking about, some companies may be different from others, and, and I agree with you 100% of that. You can't treat, every situation or every context with the same tools. But I've always told my students this when teaching at the post secondary level is that, look, we shape our tools, but our tools shape us as well. And what I mean by that, whenever I tell that, is this aspect of the tools that we decide to use, whether it's a particular framework, whatever it may be. Let's say, from a privacy and a health perspective, you have your HIPAA compliance, etc. You work with that. That also shapes your frame of reference. It also shapes who you talk to about the work that you're doing. As a CISO, over a period of time, have you found yourself now speaking less to just the IT folks, but speaking more to everything that's happening around IT, like the board of directors, like the marketing folks, like the HR folks? What's your experience with that?
Absolutely. If in the past, when I started off in cybersecurity, it was perceived mostly as a technical issue,
Yeah.
and it was under the CIO and usually under the IT department and whatever. Today, the way I see it, and when I teach, and I also teach CISSP and
Yeah.
CISO courses and others, I always tell them the first question I ask in CISO training is, who here has an MBA?
No.
And they look at me, and there's always one person who asks me, did you mean a master's in computer science? No, I did not ask about computer science. I asked about master in business administration. The reason is, I think today, in the last probably about 6, 7, maybe even 10 years,
Yeah.
I've been working mostly with senior management, with the board of directors, with the CEO. I've been working very closely with them because security is a business issue. It's not a technical issue. When I want to do something with all the members of the company, everyone, all the employees, it's not a technical issue. If I could control cybersecurity via some sort of technology, that will make our lives super easy.
Yep.
But unfortunately, that's not the situation today.
Yep.
So I do work a lot with senior management, board of directors all the time.
Yeah, and I think it's very.
And actually, I
Go
think
ahead.
that, yeah, sorry.
No, no, go ahead.
I think that getting a business degree when you're in cybersecurity gives you some sort of perspective. I'm not that big on official training and official and going to academia, yeah, etc. But I do think that in that aspect, understanding business and the way businesses work is crucial for the success of being a strong security manager or leader, CISO.
If I can, and I'm going to try my very best to sort of phrase this question in a way that can be contextualized in Israel for that matter. And I'll be the first to admit this, and I'm very excited. This is probably the third time I am engaging live with a practitioner from Israel and Tel Aviv, and it's a very humbling experience as well. So I'm going to ask this, but if it crosses a line, please feel free to cut me off on this. I personally, when I work, especially in the academic environments, I've always insisted on the fact that policy and practice are two different things. When you realize reform when you change policy, you bring about a revolution when you change the mindset of the people. Would you say that from a cybersecurity perspective, in Israel, the mindset of the people is way, way ahead of many other countries in terms of understanding of cybersecurity?
Wow. No, I don't think so. Actually, I
Okay.
think that as as a nation, we are more receptive to new technology. We are more receptive to new ideas, but that's as a whole. I think that in cybersecurity, we have a serious problem. People are not aware.
Yeah.
People do not understand that they are personally at risk, and why is that? I don't think it's very different from other nations. I work a lot in the UK, in other environments, most around Europe. I don't see a big difference. Depending, mostly depends on what sort of industry you're in. If you're in the high tech industry in Israel, yeah, you have a very strong advantage. Most people in high tech came out of elite technological units in the IDF.
Yeah.
They have some sort of understanding about cybersecurity, or at least about their own security practices, but it's not enough.
Yeah. And staying with that line of business and the competitive element that Israel has been able to fortify in the world of innovation, in the world of startups. I mean, I'm sure our audience is well aware that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, May, Waze, which is a tool that I probably used to get to this beautiful studio, came out of Israel and then got sold. But there are other cybersecurity innovations coming out of Israel as well. Help me understand this. Is the, and again, slightly away from cybersecurity, but I want to peek into your perspective on the environment and the innovation ecosystem in Israel. Is the goal at the end of the day, let's create something really solid and innovative in security and then sell it? Or are more Israelis now inclined to saying, you know what, we can build and structure our own companies and grow out of Tel Aviv because of the kind of cyber dome and cyber safety that we have in place?
Well, I think that Israelis, in general, most Israelis are more into doing the startup, selling it, making a lot of money, and then starting the next startup,
Yeah.
and not really building companies that are built to last. I think that, again, as a nation, of course, we have exceptions to the rules. We have Palo Alto, and we have Checkpoint, and we have Waze, great, and Wix. Amazing technologies came out of Israel, and so many others, and they are built as a built to last
Independently, yeah.
company. We have Elbit that just celebrated, I think, 50 years, which is incredible.
Yeah.
Elbit Systems of Israel. And I think it's incredible. But I think most Israelis understand that we are very good at innovation. We are less good in structure and working in according to specific practices. We are quick, we are hardworking, but we're not very structured in nature. That is something that is very relevant in the Israeli nation in general, in the industry. I see it all the time. We are very strong, for example, in security innovation, in offensive security, less so in real, let's say, privacy and governance and things like that are less strong in Israel in general.
All magical achievements need some dose of madness, and I think there is a method that comes to that madness in Israel, and that's evidenced by the kind of companies. In fact, here in the town of Ajax, ICE VR and CyberX, well, ICE VR is the conglomerate, but CyberX and Armor Cyber, which comes out of Israel, Gilad Perry and David Chernetsky. It's their formation right here in the town of Ajax, not too far from this facility as well. So for our audience, IceVR is North America's first ever cybersecurity escape room with virtual reality headsets for cybersecurity awareness and training. Now, May, we've got another 2 or 3 minutes, and I want to take this time to talk a little bit more about the cybersecurity postures that you're paying more attention to now. And I want to drive the conversation towards the pandemic. How has the pandemic impacted business and remote work in Israel? And B, from your perspective, I mean, we all know this. The perimeter is dead. If anything, it's non-existent. But how have you adapted, or what has changed in your virtual CISO world in relation to COVID-19 and in Israel?
Well, I think that a lot of companies found themselves in a situation that whether they like it or not, people are going to work from home. As
Yep.
you can see, I'm now in my home office. I didn't have a home office before COVID-19. I used to work in my younger brother's room because I live next to my parents. And I actually used lockdown to build my own studio outside the house, which is very comfortable and helpful. To be honest, I haven't left my town in about, I think, 2 or 3 weeks for actual meetings because I didn't have to. I think most Israeli companies moved completely virtual. We work remotely 90% of the time on 90% of things. Personally, it's not only that it didn't really negatively affect the business, my business actually grew in response to COVID-19 because a lot of companies moved to remote working and they had to deal with the human element again. We have to do things, we have to educate. If we send all our employees to work from home, we have to give them the tools of doing it in a safe way. So for me personally, it was an opportunity, to be honest,
Yep.
to do new things, to try and tackle that from a new perspective. And I think most Israeli companies are now working remotely. It's easy enough. Israel is so small, so if we really want to meet, we can, but there is no real reason.
We have a couple of more minutes, and I also want to bring in another question, which I think is fundamental to the basic ethos of the Cyber Exchange platform that we're on. You're on a variety of platforms. You speak at TEDx talks. You're internationally renowned. You have a book as well. The Cyber Exchange
Yeah.
platform, when you were reached out to, you said yes almost instantaneously. Why is it important for you to continue to grow your network in this space?
Well, there's a great book in Hebrew that unfortunately was not translated yet to English, though the author is a friend of mine. So every time we sit down and talk, I tell him, you have to translate the other books because they only did the first one. His name is Yuval Abramovich, and his first book, The List, was actually published in the US, in Canada as well. As far as I know, it's available on eBay, on Amazon. And one of his other books is called The Opportunity, and it talks about seizing opportunities. Now, when you reached out and talked to me about CyberX, I looked it up online, saw a great initiative with
Yep.
great community, great content.
Yep.
Why shouldn't I say this? To
Yep.
be honest, if I really want to get the message across, and my biggest issue today is not the business. The business is growing and it's wonderful and everything is great. But if I look at my volunteer work about my community in Israel, Think Safe Cyber, which is going to go global in the next couple of weeks, it's going to go to be TSC Global, and we have a lot of great plans. The only way of making a real impact going is looking outside our own comfort zone. Being in Israel is fantastic and it's incredible and very humbling to see seeing so many people. We have almost 5,000 people, active people in the community in about 6 months of work, which is incredible. But it's only the tip of the iceberg.
Yep.
Security awareness is an ongoing issue around the world. People are not as aware as I think they should be. I think people are afraid of cyber. People do not use the internet because they're afraid. They don't do online shopping because
Yep.
they're afraid. They don't let their kids have smartphones because they're afraid.
Yep.
And there's really no reason to be afraid. It's just like road safety. If you go back 100 years ago, there was no such thing as traffic jams, as even traffic lights. It's a new invention. A crossroad is something that is relatively new from the late 1920s. It's just a new technologies. We have to learn the basic life skills pertaining to cybersecurity. It's the same life skills that we learned when it was road safety. So it's exactly the same. It's just a new technology.
You know, we have a saying that it's very easy to trade in fear, quite the opposite to trade in hope. And I think one of the things that you've done by being a part of this is shown to the world the relationships that can be built around innovation, around technology. At the Cyber Exchange Advisory, myself as an advisor, we have individuals from India, we have individuals from Dubai, we have individuals who are from Iran as well. We've got a global community. And I think this is so essential because we need to underscore the fact that We're all united against bad actors who, and I said this in another talk, who not only have the ability to make the witnesses vanish, they have the ability to make the entire court vanish. That's the strength of the bad actors in the world of security, and it's extremely important that we all share with each other across geographies and across boundaries. With that said, I have a closing question for you, and I ask this of every advisory, and that is, if there was a book, and you've already hinted at one, so you can continue to say the same one, although it may not be accessible to many of us since it's written in Hebrew, but is there
Yeah.
any other book or movie that you would recommend for somebody to get into the mindset of May?
Well, my book, of course,
Of
when it will
course.
come out in English, probably around November.
Yeah.
Don't click here. No, but to be honest, there are a lot of books.
Yeah.
I think the ones that I think one of the most inspiring books I've read is, as I said, The List by Yuval Abramovich,
Yeah.
which is the idea is we can all create the lives we want and influence and do whatever we want. We just have to plan it. And if you create a list and not just say, I want to be a millionaire. If you want to be a millionaire, great. If that's your life dream, go for it. But break it down into little pieces of what you want to do. How are you going to achieve that goal? And usually when you read such a book, your goal will not be a millionaire. It will be influence others, do something for the greater good, do something for my good,
Absolutely.
but something that is a little bit bigger than myself. So I think that's a great book. It is available on Amazon, and I really recommend it.
May, before we close, I have the challenging task of taking this entire ocean of information and serving it in a cup. So bear with me while I summarize and close. To our audience, before I thank May, I want to thank you for taking the time. And I hope that from this session, between here, Canada, and all the way in Israel, you've picked up from these little pieces of information that can inform your own practice as academics, your own practice as practitioners, but more importantly, your own practice as human beings involved in the digital ecosystem. If there's one common idea that I heard repeatedly from May, it is the idea of don't be scared of failing. Be scared of not trying. And this is absolutely essential. You need to try. The way must be tried. The fear should come from nothing but not trying. And I say this because if we try different mechanisms, we try different approaches, we engage with different people, just as I have done today, we break borders and we break boundaries, you're able to realize the art of what's possible. Often, everything is impossible until it's done, just like the exchange and engagement we had today. I really think that what May has advised us to think about is how do you humanize and democratize the world of cybersecurity and access to information and knowledge. In many other sessions, I quoted Animal Farm by George Orwell, where I spoke about Napoleon the pig and the moment when reform went wrong and a dictatorship came in place. Initially, it began with the commandment, all animals are equal, and then it translated into, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Let's not have that happen in cybersecurity. To quote Sarah Qureshi, it's not about a woman in cyber or a man in cyber. It's a person in cyber, a society in cyber. May, thank you so much for your time today. On behalf of the advisors, I want to thank you repeatedly for 10:30 p.m. your time for joining us. I do hope that you can stay for another 2 minutes in the green room so we can have some quick final conversations and bid you adieu. Thank you, May.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
Hey, May.